All right, let's talk about a man who never, ever expected to be president, yet somehow ended up making some of the most world-altering decisions of the entire 20th century. This is the incredible story of Harry S. Truman, the accidental president.
Can you even imagine? Those were Truman's actual words to a group of reporters the day after he was suddenly sworn in. You can just feel the sheer weight of the world crashing down on his shoulders. One minute he's doing his job, the next, the entire planet has fallen on him.
I mean, get this. He'd only been vice president for 82 days. In all that time, President Roosevelt had only bothered to meet with him twice. So Truman was completely in the dark about the biggest secrets of World War II, including the top-secret Manhattan Project and the atomic bomb. And now, suddenly, all of it was his problem.
So, you have to ask, how in the world did a man so unprepared for the presidency even get there? Well, to really get Truman, you have to look at his journey. It was anything but typical. His path to the White House was, to put it mildly, pretty improbable.
You look at his early life, and it's just all over the place. He was a farmer. He was an artillery captain who actually saw combat in World War I. He even tried to run a men's clothing store, a haberdashery, and it went bankrupt. On top of all that, he was the only president since the 1890s who didn't have a college degree. This was hardly the resume you'd expect for a future leader of the free world.
So when he first got to the Senate, a lot of people just wrote him off. They called him the senator from Pendergast, basically dismissing him as a puppet for a big city political boss. But boy, did he prove them wrong. He completely shattered that image by leading a committee that went after wartime waste and corruption. It saved the country something like $15 billion. That work totally transformed his reputation and, wouldn't you know it, put him on the national map.
And just as he's hitting his stride, boom, he's thrust into the presidency. And his first big challenge was immediate and absolutely monumental. The war in Europe was winding down, but the fight in the Pacific was still a bloodbath. And suddenly, Harry Truman was the commander-in-chief.
So put yourself in his shoes for a second. This is the enormous dilemma he's facing. Soon after taking office, he goes to the Potsdam Conference, and that's where they tell him the atomic bomb is ready to go. The alternative, a full-scale, boots-on-the-ground invasion of Japan. So, what would you do?
Well, the administration's thinking at the time was pretty stark. The decision was based on these horrifying military estimates that a ground invasion could cost up to 1 million Allied lives and millions more Japanese lives. So the stated goal was simple, and it was brutal. End the war as fast as humanly possible to avoid that invasion. This really gets to the core of who Truman was as a person. He never, ever shied away from a tough call. You know that famous sign he'd later have on his desk, "The buck stops here"? Well, this decision, this was the ultimate test of that whole philosophy. With the war finally over, the world was an absolute wreck. Truman's job had to pivot on a dime, from winning the war to trying to build a lasting peace, and containing a brand new threat, Soviet communism.
And this idea, containment, became the absolute cornerstone of American foreign policy for the next 40 years. The goal was pretty straightforward. Stop the Soviets from expanding their influence, not by starting another world war, but by supporting free nations who were resisting them. This policy would go on to define the entire Cold War.
And he didn't just talk about it, he put it straight into action. The Marshall Plan, for example, wasn't just charity, it was this brilliant move. By pouring billions into rebuilding Western Europe, America helped create stable democracies that could push back against communism. Then, when the Soviets tried to starve West Berlin with a blockade, Truman didn't flinch. He ordered the Berlin Airlift, a massive non-stop supply operation that broke the blockade without firing a single shot. An incredible triumph.
But, his challenges weren't just on the other side of the world. The fights he faced right here at home were just as intense.
When it came to civil rights, Truman was way ahead of his time. He was the first president ever to go and speak before the NAACP, and he called civil rights a moral priority. Then he went even further. He took a huge political risk and issued executive orders to desegregate the U.S. military and the entire federal government. These were groundbreaking moves, and they were deeply unpopular, especially inside his own party. And those risky decisions, especially on civil rights, just fractured his support base. By 1948, his approval rating was down in the 30s. His own Democratic Party split into 3 different factions. Every poll, every pundit, every politician, they all agreed. Harry Truman was toast. There was no way he was going to win the election.
But Truman, he refused to believe the polls. He launched his legendary whistle-stop train tour, traveling over 21,000 miles, giving these fiery, off-the-cuff speeches directly to the American people. And the result? one of the greatest political upsets in American history, captured perfectly in that amazing photo of a grinning Truman holding up that newspaper with the headline that got it so wrong.
Truman's second term, though, wouldn't be about triumphant victories. It would be defined by a new, frustrating war, and a decision that would make him one of the most unpopular presidents of his time.
When North Korea invaded South Korea in 1950, Truman sent in U.S. troops. But the war quickly got bogged down in a stalemate, and the famous hero of World War II, General Douglas MacArthur, wanted to escalate things. He wanted to expand the war into China, maybe even use nuclear weapons. And he wasn't quiet about it. He openly and publicly challenged the president's entire strategy.
So Truman had a choice to make. He decided to make a stand for a core principle of American democracy, that civilians control the military. And he fired a national hero. A quote that came out years later really captures his blunt, no-nonsense reasoning perfectly. The political cost of that decision was just enormous. By February 1952, with the Korean War grinding on and MacArthur gone, Truman's approval rating hit rock bottom, 22%. At the time, it was the lowest approval rating ever recorded for a sitting president. He left the White House deeply unpopular, seen by a lot of people as a failure. But it's funny how time changes things, isn't it? Today, historians have totally reassessed his presidency. They now rank him among the best presidents for his decisive, courageous leadership during one of the most dangerous periods in world history.
Which really just leaves us with this one last thought. Here's a guy from humble beginnings, a Missouri farmer, who was thrown into power and made decisions that literally shaped the world we all live in today. The common man who is faced with the most uncommon challenges imaginable. So how should we remember him? That's a pretty fascinating question to think about.